Shannon Watkins with the James G. Martin Center for Academic Renewal, and I'm here today with Preston Cooper, a senior fellow at the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, where he does research on and writes about issues relating to the costs of higher education. Preston majored in economics at Swarthmore College and is currently working on a PhD in economics at George Mason University. He is also a contributor to Forbes. Last fall, he released the first in a series of reports diving into the return on investment of college degrees. The first looked at bachelor's degrees, the second at graduate degrees, and the third at associate degrees and certificates earned at community colleges. We'll be discussing his research and findings today. Preston, thank you for taking the time to speak with me.
Sure, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Wonderful. Well, to get started, your research reports take a close look at the financial value of thousands of college degrees. Before diving into any specifics, could you share with us what prompted you to take on this project?
Well, thanks very much. When you ask students why they're going to college, they'll usually give a number of reasons, but the number one reason that they'll always give is, I want to be able to get a better job and get higher earnings. There are lots of other things that are important too, making friends, having late night conversations about Plato, but the most important thing is that college degree is going to provide you some economic security, that it's going to increase your lifetime earnings by a significant amount. And most importantly, that it's going to make it so that you can earn back the costs of your education. And so I really wanted to look at, is college actually worth it? Are the financial benefits that are deriving from those degrees, are they large enough in order to offset the costs, including both tuition and opportunity costs, the time we spent out of the labor force? And we can get into the specifics of the results, but it turned out to be that the answer to whether is college worth it is not a yes or no. It's sometimes. And the most important question that students can ask is not, is college worth it, but when is college worth it? Because there are a whole lot of different degrees, a whole lot of different majors, a whole lot of different schools out there. And the value of those degrees is very uneven. It's not always the same. It'll depend on your major, most importantly. It'll depend on what school you go to, what kind of credential you get. And we can talk about, which credentials are more likely to pay off. But, that's really the most important takeaway, that college is not a monolith, and it really depends on what kind of degree you're getting.
Excellent, thank you. In your work, you look specifically at ROI. Can you return on investment? Can you briefly review what the ROI of a college degree is and how you calculated it?
Absolutely. So ROI, or return on investment, this is basically the financial benefits that you get from a degree minus the costs. And so we can calculate ROI by basically splitting that into its two component parts, the benefits and the costs. And the benefits, financial benefits of a college degree, are basically, what do you earn over your lifetime, and subtract what would you have earned if you didn't get the college degree. What is the counterfactual? So I got a degree in economics from Swarthmore College, and so I'm estimated to earn X amount over the course of my lifetime. But if I were me, the same person in that parallel universe where I don't go to college at all, I just immediately enter the labor force with my high school degree, and I just pursue my career that way, what would I have earned in that scenario? And so we can subtract that number, that counterfactual, from the actual earnings that I get from my degree. And we can say, well, this is the increase in lifetime earnings that is attributable to my degree. And so then we also have to consider the costs of the degree. So I paid tuition to Swarthmore, and I also spent 4 years out of the labor force while I was earning that degree. We have to add those costs up. And most importantly, also, we have to consider the risk that you don't finish the degree, that maybe you go to college for a couple of years, it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you have to drop out. In that case, you're assuming some of the costs of college, you're still paying a couple of years tuition, but you're probably not getting most of the benefits, because we know that you usually have to get the degree. You actually have to graduate in order to get the benefits of college. So we take the benefits of that college degree, we subtract the costs, tuition, opportunity costs, risk of not completing, and we end up with ROI, return on investment. And this is the expected value that you can expect to get from each of about 30,000 bachelor's degree, which is the number of degrees in our data set. So it's a bit of a complicated calculation, but fortunately we've done the math so you don't have to, and we have the financial value estimates for thousands of different degrees.
Perfect. Thank you. That really helps set the stage for my next questions. In your first report, you calculated the ROI for nearly 30,000 bachelor's degrees, if that's correct.
That's right.
And you found that while some programs produce notable increases in lifetime earnings, many others, particularly in the humanities, did not. Could you summarize some of the key findings from this report and conclude with any advice for prospective undergraduates?
Absolutely. So what we find is that the most important determinant of the financial value of your college degree is going to be your major. There are certain majors that just pay off much better than others. That's just the reality. So if you major in engineering, computer science, economics, nursing, business, these degrees are more than 90% likely to pay off. So more than 90% of degrees in these fields are going to produce a positive return on investments. At the other end of the spectrum, you also have degrees like art and music, philosophy, theology, psychology. That's a big one. These degrees don't pay off nearly as often. In fact, a majority of some of the degrees, those degrees, especially in the arts and music, those degrees tend not to pay off. Students do not get a big enough earnings increase from those degrees in order to earn back the cost of their education. And so if you're choosing one of those majors, I do have some bad news that your degree is not likely to pay off. But major is super important, but it's not everything. Another big factor behind return on investment in higher education is what institution you go to, because one of the big factors that's going to determine whether your degree pays off is whether you actually get the degree. What is the graduation rate at the school that you go to? And we know that graduation rates vary a lot across higher education. Some schools have a graduation rate of 5-10%, pretty abysmal, whereas some are graduating 90-95% of their students, almost all their students. And so that choice of institution is going to have an impact on whether your degree is likely to pay off. So it's really both a combination of your choice of major and your choice of institution that's going to determine it. Major tends to be a little bit more important, but you can't dismiss the other factors as well.
Great, thank you. Many continue their education beyond a bachelor's degree. There is I think, a fairly common perception that the more advanced graduate credentials will result in greater lifetime earnings. And your second report actually looks at the ROI of graduate degrees. How accurate is this general perception?
Well, I do have some bad news for people who are thinking about pursuing a master's degree, that these are much less likely to pay off than bachelor's degrees. We find that about 28% of bachelor's degrees have a negative ROI, that they're not going to earn enough to, students are not going to earn enough to get back the cost of their education in about 28% of cases. Among master's degrees, that figure rises to about 43%. So 43%, almost half of master's degrees do not pay off, which is pretty shocking and also kind of concerning, because people tend to borrow much greater amounts in student debt when they get a master's degree than when they get a bachelor's degree. Master's degrees tend to be cash cows for universities. They're going to charge higher tuition. They're going to give you fewer scholarships, so you're going to have to rely more on student loans if you get a master's degree. And it turns out that a lot of these degrees, quite frankly, are scams. That they really do not provide the economic mobility that the institutions promise when they offer these advanced degree programs, and which is rather scary, because master's degrees have seen a huge increase in enrollment over the past 10 years or so. More and more students are getting master's degrees, and I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people have the perception that if I get more degrees, that's going to increase my earnings, that's going to give me more financial stability. For some degrees, that's the case, but for far too many, that is not the case. And that's, I think, if there's one most important result that I think people aren't aware of right now that they should be aware of, I would say that's it. That the master's degrees really, in many cases, do not provide the economic value they promise.
Well, no, that's very unfortunate. Community colleges, let's shift to
Yes.
those because that's your third report. Can serve as a more affordable alternative to
Mhm.
four-year institutions. An associate's degree or certificate can financially pay off, in other words. But your findings show in your third report that they don't always. What programs are a wise investment and which ones aren't?
That's a great question. So, as you mentioned, community colleges are often touted as a more affordable alternative to 4-year college, and in many cases that's true. In many cases that's not. And I think that, you know, similarly to bachelor's degrees, it really comes down to what are you studying. If you go to community college and you pursue a degree, say in registered nursing, like an ASN, an Associate of Science in Nursing, that degree is extremely likely to pay off. The median return on an ASN is going to be greater than the median return on a bachelor's degree. So if you're going to a 2-year college and getting a degree in nursing, you're probably going to be better off financially than if you went to a 4-year college. But that's not true for all 2-year degrees. Especially degrees in the liberal arts, humanities, general studies, English literature. These 2-year degrees in those fields are extremely unlikely to pay off. That usually it's about 85-90% of degrees in these fields have a negative ROI. So we find that about I believe it's 30, 35, 40% of associate's degrees, these 2-year degrees, do not pay off. But that varies a lot by what the field of study is. As I mentioned, registered nursing, that pays off a lot. More vocationally oriented, career oriented associate's degrees, these tend to pay off really well. They tend to have a very reliable return. But if you're kind of going to a community college with when you're enrolling in a degree program that doesn't necessarily have that career orientation, the payoffs for that are generally a lot lower, and students are frequently not recouping the cost of their education.
This is all wonderful information, and I know your research will certainly help parents and students navigate the high costs of college and hopefully avoid poor investments in education. Um, but what can be done to make the institutions that are offering financially questionable degrees, what can be done to make them accountable?
It's a great question. So every single degree and certificate program that I analyze in this ROI analysis has one thing in common. They are all funded by the federal government. So all of them, the students in those programs can get Pell Grants and student loans, federal student loans, in order to help them pay for college. And in some cases, that's helping. That's really helping with economic mobility. In some cases, that's students are taking those dollars and they're using them to get the degrees that will really advance their earnings prospects, enable them to get into the middle class and live a great life. But too often, the federal government is funding programs that don't have a return on investment. And students are often taking out these huge loans, going into programs, sometimes not graduating, sometimes graduating with a degree that's not worth all that much. And they have a lot of trouble repaying their loans. And then we get, politicians clamoring for student loan forgiveness and all the kind of political dysfunction that goes with that. So it really is, one of the biggest issues right now in higher ed policy to say, well, how can we make sure that the programs that the federal government is funding are actually providing a good return on investment? How can we make sure that they're at least making students better off? Not every program is going to make you rich, but it should at least provide some financial value. And so I would argue that, policymakers should take a closer look at these programs that the federal government is funding. I would say that, if a program is not providing financial value for its students, if students are consistently falling behind on their loan payments, if students are consistently earning less than we would expect for college graduates to earn, those programs should no longer participate in federal student aid. Those programs should no longer get taxpayer funding in order to operate. That it's it really is criminal to for the federal government to give its stamp of approval to these programs, to give students money, sometimes tens of thousands of dollars, to enroll and participate in these programs, and for them to then not get a return on investment. So, I am encouraged by the fact that both the Republican and Democratic parties seem to have some interest in stronger accountability rules for programs that are getting federal funding. I think that the two parties are somewhat far apart on what exactly should be done, and which programs should be targeted and so forth. But I think that there is some bipartisan agreement that something does need to be done on this front. So for that reason, I am optimistic.
That sounds like a great recommendation, and I share your enthusiasm, your optimism. Well, Preston, those are all my questions. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, and thank you for your important work on this. This is a very, very important issue, of course, affecting so many students in the United States. So we appreciate your work. Thank you.
Thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on your show and share it with the world. I hope that the students and parents who are listening right now will find it useful as they navigate these decisions about college.
Wonderful. Thank you, Preston.
Thanks very much. Have a good one.